Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ulrike Al-Khamis, and I'm the Director of Collections and Public Programs here at the Aga Khan Museum. A very, very warm welcome on this very special day, which marks the opening of our once-in-a-lifetime exhibition, The Moon, A Voyage Through Time, the Aga Khan's very own celebration of the 50th anniversary of humanity's first landing on the moon on July 20th, 1969. Before I introduce my very special dear colleague and outstanding co-curator of the Moon exhibition, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which the Aga Khan Museum stands today has been a land of cultural meeting for over hundreds of years, under the stewardship of the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the Huron-Wendat, the Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. We honor them and we express our sincere gratitude. It is my particular pleasure and privilege today to introduce one of the most respected, multi-talented, and inspirational personalities in the field of Islamic art today. Dr. Christiane Gruber's professional portfolio is mind-bogglingly kaleidoscopic. Roving scholar and curator, author, teacher in her capacity as professor of Islamic art, and if that were not enough, associate chair in the History of Art department at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Among her extensive research interests are topics as diverse and fascinating as the arts of the book, figural painting, including the depictions of the Prophet Muhammad, as well as Islamic calligraphy and the modern visual and material culture of the Islamic world. Christiane has written and edited numerous books, including the catalog for our Moon exhibition, and her most recent publication was actually launched here in Toronto only a few days ago, The Praiseworthy, The Prophet Muhammad and Islamic Texts and Images. Before I invite Dr. Gruber to the podium to tell us more about the moon as mirror of faith, science, and the arts, please may I ask you all to silence your cell phones, and may I also remind you that video and voice recordings are not permitted in this auditorium. And please now extend a very warm welcome to Professor Christiane Gruber. Thank you.
Thank you very much, in particular to Ulrike for the warm introduction and having reached out to me when she decided that she might like to curate a show on the moon. Thank you for bringing me on board. Thank you to the whole staff at the Aga Khan Museum, in particular Sarah, who's been such a joy to have as a partner as well. So without further ado, I will launch straight into today's lecture on the moon as a mirror of faith, science, and the arts. A little less than 2 months ago, on January 20th, our eyes gazed up at an unusual astronomical event dubbed the Super Blood Wolf Moon. What transpired in the skies above was a full lunar eclipse at a moment in time when the moon came close to the Earth during its elliptical orbit. This monumental moon illuminated the night sky in a ruddy color, creating a celestial drama that captured our attention and imagination to the point where we might have been tempted to howl like wolves. Yet our fascination with the Earth's only natural satellite is not new, even though it has been propelled exponentially ever since the landing of the spaceflight Apollo 11 exactly 50 years ago. This landmark expedition saw humankind take a big leap and land its first steps on the lunar surface. It also yielded a treasure trove of lunar rock and soil samples that have been studied ever since. Beyond its importance in the international space race, this televised trek allowed us observers to feel as we might be able to hover in outer space, all the while looking back upon the earth in a manner that reminds us of the tiny spot that we occupy in the larger cosmos. The relationship of the moon to the earth is a close and dynamic one. Indeed, it is believed that the moon originated as a chunk that broke away from the earth, and at about 4.5 billion years in age, is about as ancient as its earthly progenitor. At about a quarter of the Earth's size, the moon's surface is covered with thousands of craters, some of which measure several hundred kilometers in diameter. Visible to the naked eye and giving the moon its sponge-like appearance, the crater's floors and peaks are believed to have been caused by the impact of meteorites and asteroids. The great majority of lunar craters have been given names, including Apollo after the first landing. In addition, over 20 of them commemorate illustrious scientists and learned men from the Islamic world. Among them can be counted the world-famous physician, astronomer, and doctor Ibn Sina, also known to some of you as Avicenna, the intrepid globetrotter Ibn Battuta, and the polymath scholar al-Biruni. As we thus look up to the moon today, we behold a surface speckled with troughs commemorating the legacy of science and knowledge in Muslim cultures stretching back more than a millennium. Among these many scientists, al-Biruni stands tall. Active during the 11th century, he composed a number of treatises, including one dedicated entirely to lunar eclipses. His most influential work, however, was his quote-unquote book of instruction in the elements of the art of astronomy. For those of you who might know a little bit of Arabic, you'll notice that the term for astronomy is tanjim, because astrology and astronomy were known as the science of the stars, tanjim or ilm al-nujum in Arabic. In his large work on the science of the stars, that is, astronomy and astrology, al-Biruni has plenty to say about the moon, known as al-qamar in Arabic. For example, he tells his readers not to confuse the moon with the sun, the latter a celestial body that actively emits radiance. To the contrary, the moon is pale and lacks brilliance due to the fact that it is, quote-unquote, a non-luminous globular body, end quote. Its luminescence is entirely contingent upon the sun, and it is for these reasons that in Islamic traditions, and in other traditions as well, that the moon and the sun are often spoken of conjointly as the quote-unquote two moons or the two celestial luminaries, the qamaran. In this duo, however, the moon is considered a lesser sun and is often conceptualized in receptive and therefore feminine terms. Revealing the high degree of scientific knowledge of his day, al-Biruni goes on to tell his readers a bit more about the moon, including its waxing and waning. It takes the moon a little over 27 days to complete one full revolution around the Earth. However, a full lunar month is 29 and a half days, because that is how long it takes the moon to return to its position between the sun and the Earth. As the moon embarks on its journey from new crescent moon to full moon, we see a growing portion of its illuminated half, and this is called the waxing phase. In other words, its illuminated surface grows or increases. Around the middle of the month, the moon becomes full, which is known in Arabic as Badr, and Badr-Din, or the moon of religion, is actually a pretty common name. As the moon then proceeds from full to new again, we see a diminishing portion of its illuminated half, and this is called the waning phase, because it decreases in strength or intensity. During its waxing and waning, the moon's shape, al-Biruni tells us, is quote-unquote crescentic. It looks like a crescent or hilal. He then goes on to say that this crescent resembles a slice of watermelon. Batikh is the term. A wonderful analogy. Beyond this fruitful metaphor, the process by which the moon travels around the Earth every month has served as a major mechanism to measure time throughout the ages. In Islamic spheres in particular, the moon's monthly journey proved of paramount importance to the establishment of the lunar calendar that remains in use in Muslim-majority countries today. As a result, the moon helps to regulate Islamic canonical acts, including the yearly pilgrimage, or Hajj, to Mecca, and the determination of the fasting month of Ramadan. An example of this practice can be seen in a 19th century Iranian painting on display in the exhibition. Here, in this monumental composition, we see a feast of vegetables and fruits, among them the telltale watermelon, set within a garden as a figure located in the central turret raises his hands in prayerful utterance. Here he is, right there. This composition thus appears to depict the breaking of the fast during the month of Ramadan, whose precise time is determined by the sighting of the lunar crescent, which is known as Ru'yat al-Hilal. So here is our lunar crescent. Despite the prevalent use of astronomical timekeeping methods and devices, the optical observation of the crescent moon in the skies has been deemed the most reliable method by which to ascertain the beginning of the month of Ramadan, as well as its daily rhythm of keeping fast, one of the 5 main pillars of the Islamic faith. Similarly, the pilgrimage to Mecca is considered a major religious duty for Muslims, who are encouraged to undertake the Hajj once in their lifetime, financial ability and sufficient health permitting. Among various ritual practices, pilgrims perform circumambulation, or tawaf, around the Kaaba. Islamic textual sources inform us that the rotational movement of human beings around this sacred navel of the universe is intended to mimic the angels circling the throne of God, located immediately above the heavens. The concentric circles of earthly devotees also echo in their formation and movement the celestial spheres, thereby adding a cosmic dimension to the yearly peregrination to Islam's holiest site. In their schematic layout, such circumrotations resemble Islamic cosmological diagrams, which were themselves based upon and expanded ancient Greek and Roman geocentric models that are known as nested sphere models. These conceptual renderings aimed to show the apparent motions of the stars and planets within their respective rotating spheres, with the moon, known in Latin luna, shown as the closest to the Earth, which would be accurate. So here is our sphere of the moon, or luna. The logic in this placement has to do with the moon's proximity. Indeed, although it is about 400 times smaller than the sun, it also happens to be 400 times closer to the Earth. Intriguingly then, the Islamic ritual of circumambulation also symbolically recalls the celestial bodies and their movements, especially the moon's orbiting around the Earth. The moon, however, is not directly tethered to the multitude of meanings associated directly with the Kaaba. Instead, one must exit the holy precinct in order to discover further lunar narratives rooted in Mecca's environs. During the Hajj, pilgrims traditionally visit a number of sites in the Hijaz, that is, the western strip of land that is stretching all along the Red Sea coast. So here is the Hijaz, right there. The Hijazi Rift, or a range, includes a number of rocky mountain peaks associated with the life of the Prophet Muhammad and his followers, and therefore have been the site of pious visitation for centuries. They also have been celebrated in visual representations, including this early 20th century gouache painting made by a Muslim artist of Siberian origins, who in fact worked in what is now Russia. This depiction shows 5 important mountains in the Hijaz, including at the top, right here, Mount Arafat, where Muhammad delivered his farewell sermon and where pilgrims today climb to secure God's mercy and salvation, which is why it's called Jabal Rahma, or the Mount of Mercy. To the right, here, we see Mount Thawr, where Muhammad and Abu Bakr hid in a cave while they emigrated from Mecca to Medina, while members of the Quraysh tribe followed them in hot pursuit. Looking now towards the middle are Mount Nur, right here, where the Prophet received his first revelations of the Quran, and onward to the left here is Mount Uhud, where Muhammad and his small group of followers successfully defeated Meccan forces at a battle in 625. And then finally, below here, is Mount Abu Qubays, where the Prophet is believed to have split the moon in half when he was dared by his Meccan detractors to provide proof of his selection by God. Along with his ascension through the celestial spheres, Muhammad's supernatural lunar feat is considered the most important miracle of his prophetic career. For these reasons, the mountain is known as, quote-unquote, the place of the moon's splitting, or Jaye Shaq al-Qamar, right here, and it too is regularly visited by pilgrims during their journey through the Hijaz. The narrative of Muhammad splitting the moon in half can be traced back to the Quran, which speaks about the moon at several turns. For example, the Holy Book records individuals asking the Prophet about new moons, to which he responds that they are, quote-unquote, measurements of time for the people and for pilgrimage. In this particular verse, the moon is praised as the ultimate timekeeper and hence the celestial determiner for the Hajj. In addition, another verse praises God as, quote-unquote, he who created the night and the day and the sun and the moon, all heavenly bodies in an orbit are swimming, end quote. Of particular note in this verse is the declaration that the celestial bodies are placed under the command of God. In other words, this single, omnipotent, and transcendental deity is the only subject of worship, and therefore the faithful cannot engage in astral worship, as had been the case in ancient religious cultures around the Mediterranean and across the Middle East. Moving beyond the lunar calendar and God's creative power, the Quran also describes the sun and the moon as the two celestial luminaries, al-Qamaran. For instance, it invites believers to ponder, quote, how God has created 7 heavens in layers and made the moon therein a light and the sun a torch, end quote. Here, the second verse pays tribute to the sun as an active emitter of light, it is the torch, while the moon is its passive recipient, a light, a premise that was undergirded by scientific knowledge antedating the arrival of Islam in the 7th century. Moving on to our last verse, we see here the first verse of the Quran's chapter of the moon, or Surat al-Qamar, number 54, which describes the splitting of the moon in two as a harbinger of the apocalypse. This cataclysmic lunar event serves as a warning to non-believers to adhere to the Quran before the day of judgment, which is also known as the hour. So the hour has arrived. Let me go back here. There we go. The hour has arrived and the moon has been split. Like the tumbling of the stars, boiling over of seas, and crumbling of mountains, the moon's cleaving counts as a reversal of natural order occurrences, heralding end times. Apocalyptic phenomena also are thought to include the conjunction of the sun and the moon on the day of judgment. As can be seen in this image illustrating a Conditions of Resurrection manuscript produced in Ottoman lands in the early 17th century, the two celestial luminaries appear uncannily close in the light blue sky, as these are surmounted by stars studding the upper portion of the picture frame. Below, huddled masses of resurrected men, clad in white shroud-like garments, latch onto one another in fear and awe of this portentous event. Several illustrated versions of this text, The Conditions of Resurrection, were made around this time, and another copy that is now preserved in Istanbul likewise illustrates the conjunction of the sun and the moon during the so-called Day of Gathering. Here, on the right, rather than depicting the two celestial bodies as separate entities on the approach, the artist has combined them into a single composite luminous and globular body. Here is our sun and moon, or Al-Qamaran. This pictorial motif recalls the description of the so-called two luminaries as described through the dual yet singular noun Al-Biruni and other scientists and writers use. And I found that interesting. Al-Qamaran is one word for two entities, and here we have one picture for two entities as well. As the timing of these illustrated manuscripts attests, the fear of end times accelerated around the end of the millennium of the Islamic lunar calendar, prompting the production of illustrated eschatological texts in which the moon figures prominently as a celestial omen of things to come. Not limited to the apocalypse alone, the moon is also associated with Muhammad's prophetic career. Indeed, the Quranic verse that speaks of the splitting of the moon in half not only served to warn believers of the apocalypse, but also came to be interpreted as a literal event that occurred during Muhammad's lifetime. A great number of Islamic texts that interpret and expand upon the Quran narrate that Muhammad was dared by his Meccan enemies to produce a miracle to prove his divinely appointed apostleship. Thereupon, he pointed his finger, or several fingers, skyward, tore the moon asunder, and enjoined his adversaries to witness the event by issuing the imperative order, "Behold." As a miraculous form of witnessing the faith, Muhammad's splitting of the moon, as we noted previously, is rooted in the Hijaz's sacred geography and the pilgrim's route encompassing of Mount Abu Qubais, where this momentous event is said to have transpired. The moon splitting also carried over to the painterly arts of Islam. It was depicted in early modern manuscripts, included illustrated books of omens known as fal-names, as in the example shown here. Made in Iran during the 16th century, this omen book was consulted by readers to help them determine a future course of action. The splitting of the moon in these manuscripts counts among a number of depicted religious and epic themes, each of which is accompanied by an augury text. It's a little bit like tarot cards, in other words. In this example, the prognostication for the splitting of the moon informs its consultor that the time is right to undertake a journey, to buy and sell goods, and to triumph over one's enemies. In other words, Muhammad's lunar miracle serves as a highly felicitous sign. As for the painting itself, the prophet is shown wearing a blue robe and a white facial veil, his head framed by long flowing tresses and a golden aureole, as he points two fingers to the moon. Muhammad's companions observe this miraculous event as they gesture to the prophet and to the moon, or else bite their finger in amazement. Among the moon's more notable characteristics are its rounded face and its joined eyebrows. Both of these features are emphasized by our scholar Al-Biruni as embodying prime beauty traits in females, especially mothers, aunts, and other female relatives. While such gender-specific comments can be found in scientific treatises, they abound above all in Persian poetry. Turning to the subject of poetic expression, one last detail in the painting should catch our eyes, and it is the string of pearls orbiting the moon's face. Can you all see this? Here we are. Indeed, using a wide spectrum of vivid metaphors, poets writing in Arabic, Persian, Turkish, and other Islamic languages often compare the moon to an ostrich egg, an unveiled bride, and above all, a white pearl flung onto a large blue silk. This 16th century depiction thus appears to rely, to a certain extent, on the poetic trope describing the moon as a rounded and lustrous beauty bedecking the silky blue sky. The moon has long served as the gold standard for waxing poetic about beauty and love in the Persian tradition in particular. Therein, the beloved, whether male or female, is often invoked as poets as moon-faced, that is, maruh or marui. For example, the famous 14th century Persian mystical poet Hafiz refers to his moon-faced beloved on a number of occasions in his divan, his collection of poems, using several nature-based metaphors. And here I quote one poem. "You are a beloved, so subtle, so pure, the very water of life envies you. You steal my heart. So lovely, so beautiful, that the full moon is jealous of you." The full moon here is Mah-e Tamam in Persian. Here, Hafiz mobilizes the trope of covetousness. Both water, personified as the sustainer of life, and the moon, as grand illuminator of the night skies, are said to fail in their attempts to rival the languid and translucent beauty of the beloved. Further strengthening this lunar metaphor, Hafiz goes on to focus not only on the beloved's rounded face, but also his or her facial features. Surmounting a pair of transfixing eyes, the beloved's eyebrows catch Hafiz's attention the most. He describes these as bows shooting arrows into his heart, as well as the appearance of the new crescent moon in the sky. Quote, "This is why I became enamored. My sweetheart raised her eyebrows abru, like the crescent of a new moon." Moving on, last but not least, Hafiz also speaks of his beloved as the moon of loveliness, the Mah-e Husn, in the following words, quote, "The luminescence of the moon of beauty is from your radiant face." In such poetic constructs, writers exclaim that the moon in the skies derives its incandescence from the human beloved on earth. In this case, the beloved may be the poet's companion, or, alternatively, the prophet Muhammad, who is often described in Persian poetic texts as ascending through the celestial spheres, at which time he endows the stars and the moon with his own divinely granted luminosity. And to give you just one example of these poems, we have verses by Nizami that say, "To Muhammad, rise through the heavens, for you are the moon, speed through the stars, for you are their king," with the word moon, ma, rhyming with king, shah. So there's a play of words between ma and shah here. Beyond the realm of Persian poetry and manuscript paintings, these lunar analogies also pervade the ceramic production of the medieval Islamic world. During the 12th and 13th centuries in particular, a number of plates and bowls include depictions of moon-faced male and female characters sitting and enjoying the pleasures of music and the great outdoors. Besides the ovoid shape of faces and the crescentic eyebrows of the depicted individuals, the materials used in these elite wares cause them to shimmer with light reflections. For example, the bowls such as the one on the right make use of a glaze containing metallic or gold flecks on which mimic the look of metalwork in their iridescence and sheen. Moreover, as can be seen in the deep globular bowl on the left, the character's moon-like appearance is further emphasized through the application of gold pigment both over and under the transparent glaze. So we have a play with materialism here. Like the figure of the beloved, the moon illuminates the onward path for many a seeker. It is soft and peaceful in its glow, removes the terror of darkness, and helps the traveler reach his destination. It has thus acted as a compass and guide for millennia. Pointing the way, it parallels scientific instruments that likewise served as navigational devices, among them the Astrolabe. The Astrolabe counted as one of the most important instruments for astronomers, who used it for timekeeping and navigation. First invented by the ancient Greeks, it was perfected in the medieval Islamic world. Here it is said to have had over 1,000 different uses, from calculating the direction of prayer to Mecca, that is the Qibla, to measuring the position of celestial bodies in the sky, most especially the sun. Thanks to its incredible versatility as a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional celestial sphere, the planispheric astrolabe in particular has been dubbed by scholars a quote-unquote portable observatory, so a little observatory on the move. Observing the stars and interacting with the moon could take on other dimensions, projecting individuals not only forward in space, but also in time. For centuries, the moon was thought to illuminate the world of the unknown, which is also referred to as the world of the unseen, or alam al-ghayb. It therefore was often queried about the future. Within Muslim cultural registers, questions known as masail were posed to the moon, and prognostications or positive signs known as ikhtiyarat were deduced from it. So you ask the moon something, but you can deduce answers from it. By the 16th century, the practice of reading signs and thus forecasting the future led to the production of illustrated books of omens, or falnames. Made in Iran, India, and Ottoman lands at a time when millennial anxieties were high, falnames depict a wide range of subjects, some epic, others romantic, and still others religious and oftentimes Shi'i in character. Among the many depicted omens can be found a monumental yet minimalistic moon. With dramatically joined crescent eyebrows and parted hair strands, this moon maiden gazes back at her augury seekers, transfixing them in exchange of gazes. Above and below her, the textual omen enlightens readers about a propitious course of action. So here is our omen, here and here, by first citing the Quran. Quote, "In the name of God, the Beneficent, the Merciful, and the moon, we have determined it in phases until it returns appearing like an old palm branch. If the shining moon comes in your fortune, enjoy it. You will see great benefits this month. You will eat from the palm of joy and mirth, and you will pick a flower from the garden of hope," end quote. Here and elsewhere, the moon serves as an auspicious symbol that heralds good fortune, merriment, and jubilescence, or jubilance. Its power, however, is carefully nestled within an overarching Muslim worldview by the citation of the Quran, which at turns praises God, his power of creation, and his command over the celestial bodies. Adding a clear reference to Islam's holy text in this type of illustrated omen may have been deemed a desideratum, given the fact that posing questions to and drawing inferences from the moon antedated the arrival of Islam on the world stage. Indeed, lunar omena, or omens drawn by the moon, were a hallmark of ancient cultures around the Mediterranean basin and across the Middle East. Surviving evidence includes two texts written on papyrus, and I show you one example that is here in Vienna, that provide prognostications based on observations of the moon, including eclipses. Though transcribed in Egypt around 200 AD, these omens are clearly based on ancient Babylonian traditions. In one example, the moon is represented by a black disk, its full shape corresponding to the middle of the month, itself considered the most propitious time to seek out auguries. The representation of the moon is here accompanied by the following omen, end quote, quote, "If you see the disk rising southwards, there being one star outside it, you are to say about it, great poverty shall occur in the entire land, death shall occur, and the king of Egypt shall slay his adversaries, barley and emmer shall be abundant, and every harvest likewise in the entire land." So food for humans and animals will be plentiful at this time. Unlike the felicitous 16th century Lady Moon omen, this ancient lunar prognostication proves quite a mixed lot. On the one hand, the celestial body touts triumph and fertility, while on the other, it warns of death and destruction. Returning to the Islamic world, moon prognostications were written in rhyme and augmented with paintings, as is the case for an illustrated copy of the Free Men's Companion to the Subtleties of Poems, made in Iran in 1341. In this astrological poem, a number of images depict the moon as a crowned woman holding a crescent, accompanied by various zodiacal signs and Persian verses. At the top, the embodied moon figure appears alongside Sagittarius, represented as a centaur shooting an arrow. I hope you can see that. In the middle, she accompanies Capricorn, personified as a horned quadruped. And at the bottom, she sits beside Aquarius, depicted as a man fetching water from a well. Two lines of rhyming verses surmount each of these lunar mansions or houses, in which the moon is shown associated with a dominant constellation of stars. To give just one example of these poetic auguries, the reader is informed that when the moon is in Sagittarius, his fortune is as follows, quote, "When the moon comes to the sign of Sagittarius, make your requests from judges and men of learning. Buy slaves, make marriages, and visit the bath. Do not take medicine or weaken yourself with toil," end quote. The time is thus considered right to petition for justice and engage in trade, however suspect to our ethics today, as well as to enjoy a bit of rest and relaxation. Up until this point, we have spoken of the moon in overtly female ways, as both beauty epitomized and queen of what lies ahead. Yet the moon was also conceptualized in masculine terms, with the prime placed on its perceived power and authority over worldly affairs. Within the textual corpus, lunar metaphors for rulers and princes stipple Islamic poetry, in which the crescent moon is said to resemble a crown or taj, capping a majestic head, or else like a rounded knife or bow readied for the royal hunt. Many objects made especially during the 13th century in the Jazira region, so Upper Mesopotamia, reassert this trope by depicting an enthroned figure holding a crescent moon. Such is the case for this brass lid that is engraved and inlaid with gold. The lid probably belonged to a large ewer that was used for the courtly ritual of hand washing. Although the center figure is not identified, inscriptions on the lid extend various wishes to the owner, thereby inviting viewers to ponder the symbolic parallels between the cultured patron and the represented celestial luminary. The personification of the crescent moon pervades medieval Islamic metalwork made especially in the Jazira, and this area was at a center of lunar cults both before and even after the arrival of Islam in the region. Some of you might be familiar with the lunar cults of Harran, the city of Harran. Quite possibly influenced by local moon-related beliefs, these metalwares juxtapose images of an enthroned monarch with depictions of the personified crescent moon. The crescent moon in this case is what's known as a croissant fermé, or a closed crescent, right here. So it looks more like an orbit. Here, the closed crescent shape echoes the figure's halo, creating an orbital effect, itself triply reasserted via the roundel that encircles the composition. So once again, we have almost a cosmological diagram. Moreover, a band of text scrolls around the body of the candlestick, proclaiming glory, triumph, prosperity, fortune, and long life for the unnamed sultan who commissioned the piece and who is most likely represented enthroned right here. Through its positioning, the moon appears as a celestial harbinger of such blessings, reinforcing the message of princely authority and power through the twinned image of ruler and moon. That such an object would have been used to create shimmering lustration in a princely sphere also goes to show that oftentimes the medium is indeed the message. While these medieval metal objects would have circulated only in elite spheres, for centuries the crescent moon also has held a strong presence in public space. Dotting the flags of many Muslim countries today, the crescent and star motif in particular counts among the most readily recognizable symbols of Islam, especially when placed in visual contradistinction to the Christian crown and cross. Indeed, much like a cross ornaments the top of a church spire, many mosque domes are articulated with crescent-shaped finials. For example, at the Muhammad Ali Mosque in Cairo, this finial, which is known as the alam or sign, right here, marks the Muslim community's presence in the cityscape, while also echoing the full moon as it generates an ethereal silhouette hovering in midair. In still other cases, the actual crescent moon, whose shadow side becomes practically indistinguishable from the night sky, may appear as it is the mosque finial per se. As you can see one night at the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, right here, a Byzantine church that was transformed into a mosque after the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople in 1453. So here is our finial, and it appears as if the actual crescent moon is the sign itself. Carrying over from the sphere of faith to the politics of power, the crescent and moon eventually became an emblem of Ottoman prestige in the 18th century, and here you see it capping this portrait of an Ottoman sultan. And still today, this double motif ornaments the flag of modern Turkey. While the moon can represent faith in action or the might of an empire or modern nation state, it also appears in more mundane and quotidian circumstances. Ornamenting the human body through jewelry and even tattoos, this celestial body permeates everyday life in often subtle and highly creative ways. Pre-modern artifactual evidence suggests that moon-shaped jewelry was especially popular during the medieval period, that is, the 10th and 11th centuries. Among the many surviving bracelets, earrings, and necklaces can be counted cloisonné enamel pendants from Egypt, as you can see on the left, as well as gold exemplars excavated from the city of Nishapur in northeastern Iran, which is what you see on the right. Orbiting the necks of women in particular, these gilt fineries illuminate the human body much like the moon sparkles in the night sky. Besides the festooning of lunar jewelry, women have also enwrapped themselves in its haloed aura through the medium of luxurious fabrics. Take, for example, this group of embroidered silk shawls, which were made in the Iranian city of Yazd around the middle of the 19th century. Located in the desert plateau, Yazd was a center of Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest religions, which is concerned with the fight of good versus evil, as well as the preservation of the four sacred elements of fire, water, air, and earth. Embroidered in their very fabric, these shawls display the Zoroastrian theory of creation, with birds and fish symbolizing air and water, and quadrupeds and plants representing the animal and vegetal world. In their center also appears an embroidered roundel that would have been placed on the crown of the woman's head. This central burst of ornamentation, in one case, is surrounded by an embroidered Persian inscription. And the inscription is right here. I hope you can see it. This shawl is in the Textile Museum in Washington, D.C. Extolling the beauty of its wearer through the intangible art of poetry, the verses read, quote, "Your face, like the full moon, is lovely and graceful. Your figure is like the cypress tree elevated and flying high. Your face, like the full moon, shines over all. And I am unable to explicitly express my feeling. O Lord, I cannot express myself with my tongue. I am tongue-tied to thank you and declare my gratitude for untying my difficulties and removing my burdens." End quote. In these embroidered verses, the enwrapped woman becomes a poetic embodiment of the moon, celestial, luminous, and transcendent of language itself. Like the Zoroastrian moon deity known as Ma, a Persian word meaning both moon and month, the female thus takes on cosmic proportions as a bestower of glory and radiance in her role as the queen of the night. Stretching back centuries, the association of the moon with the female body emerges in part from the rhythm of a woman's biological cycle as being roughly equivalent to that of the lunar month. The moon's pearlescent hue and ovate shape were commented upon by pre-modern poets and astronomers alike, and today such analogies are propelled forward in contemporary feminist works of art. Among them is the short film entitled Women Bathing in the Moonlight, made by the Turkish feminist, also Kurdish, multimedia artist known as Canan, and this is also in the exhibition. In this cinematic piece, a group of women stand together as they howl at the full moon, emerging from the clouds hovering in the night sky. They wear simple scarves and garments, their long locks crowned with branches, leaves, and flowers. Appearing as if shamans or nature priestesses, their black silhouettes contrast with the deep purplish sky, itself occasionally punctuated by the prayerful raising of their hands. Halfway through the film, this bellowing chorus of wild women makes its way through the woods towards the water, where they take a dip, the moon's crystalline light ricocheting against the water's surface. The women then playfully splash around in a twinkling setting. As a result, Canan's lustrous film appears to celebrate an archaic she-wolf notion of femalehood, released from the strictures of social and cultural norms. In the end, the audiovisual result shows the female body rising and radiant, much like the moon. So let us come full circle. From the earliest astronomical observations to the newest experiments in art and technology, the moon has reigned supreme throughout the ages. Our collective fascination with this celestial body and the larger cosmos encircling us has accelerated ever more since the first landing on the moon exactly 50 years ago. The moon feels closer in our grasp, and now Mars is in robotic reach. However, while we humans continue to look up at the moon as it orbits the Earth, in this landmark exhibition, we invite visitors to voyage through time and space and to imagine themselves as if orbiting the moon, viewing it from above and below, and then to alight for a brief moment to bask in its soft glow. The moon has indeed landed at the Aga Khan Museum. We welcome you on board, and we wish you a joyous journey onward and upward to the second floor. Thank you very much.